The frontier town of Silver Creek had always seemed orderly, a place where every hoofbeat, every clink of metal, and every word spoken carried meaning. But for Margaret Maggie Harrow, the life she led beside her husband, General Thomas Harrow, felt like a gilded cage. The general was a man of duty and discipline, a towering figure whose eyes missed nothing and whose expectations weighed heavier than the winter winds that swept the plains. Maggie had once admired him, once believed in the honor of his world, but the routines, the endless parades, the endless lectures on propriety, had left her restless. It was in this restless silence that she first noticed Silas Kincaid, a frontier scout known for his uncanny ability to navigate the harshest terrains and the wildest rivers. He was a man of few words, with a presence that commanded attention without authority, a calm assurance that contrasted sharply with the rigid structure of her husband's life. He moved through the town with the ease of someone who belonged to no one, yet somehow belonged everywhere. The first time their eyes met, Maggie felt a flutter, a quiet acknowledgement that something beyond propriety had touched her heart. Their meetings began innocently, or at least, as innocently as they could in a town alive with observation. Silas was often tasked with scouting the nearby ridges, reporting on wildlife and potential dangers to the settlements along the frontier. Maggie found reasons to wander the edges of town under the pretense of supervising supplies or walking the children she did not yet have, always careful to appear casual, always careful to remain unseen by those who would question her actions. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the hills and cast long shadows over the town, Maggie found herself lingering near the edge of the creek where Silas often paused to observe animal tracks. His eyes, sharp and calculating, softened when he saw her approach. "Mrs. Harrow," he greeted quietly, tipping his wide-brimmed hat. "You shouldn't be here alone." "I could say the same to you," she replied, her voice low. "It's dangerous, wandering the frontier without caution." "Danger is nothing if one knows the terrain," he said, his gaze lingering on her longer than propriety would allow. "I'm glad you came." Maggie's heart fluttered, a dangerous, rebellious pulse she could not ignore. She knew what these feelings meant. She knew what they could cost her, not just her standing in Silver Creek, but her marriage, her honor, the life she had been taught to cherish. And yet, when she looked into Silas's steady eyes, she felt alive in a way that had eluded her for years. Their conversations grew longer, their meetings more frequent. They spoke of trivial matters at first, the weather, the river's rise, the tracks of elk and deer, but gradually, the subjects deepened. Maggie found herself sharing things she had never spoken aloud, her frustrations, her quiet dreams, the suffocating sense of being trapped in a life dictated by duty rather than desire. Silas listened without judgment, never offering solutions, only presence, a rarity in her rigid, structured world. One evening, as a storm approached, the sky a dark gray sheet rolling over the plains, Silas found Maggie standing at the barn, watching the clouds gather. He approached silently, the wind tugging at his coat. "You're here again," he said softly, though not accusingly. "I had to see the horizon," she admitted. "To remind myself there is more than walls, schedules, and expectations." "And do you?" he asked. "I do," she whispered, her breath catching in the wind. "When I see the world as it is, wild, unpredictable. I remember who I am beneath the title of General's wife." The storm broke then, rain lashing the barn, but neither of them moved. The world seemed to shrink to the two of them, a cocoon of thunder and possibility. Maggie realized, with a thrill and a terror she could not name, that her heart had chosen Silas in spite of reason, in defiance of every expectation. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew. Maggie began to dress for outings with more purpose, choosing subtle ways to be seen near the creek or the ridges. Silas would appear at just the right moment, a scout returning from a reconnaissance or pausing in his wanderings. They learned the rhythm of the frontier, the timing of patrols, the patterns of neighbors, the silence of the hills, and within that rhythm, they built their own secret world. But secrecy carries weight. Every stolen glance, every near-miss encounter with a passerby, every whispered conversation was a risk. And the town of Silver Creek, small and tight-knit, noticed. Rumors began to circulate, first faintly, then louder, growing like wildfire. Women watched Maggie's movements with suspicion. Men spoke in hushed tones at the saloon. Even the general, with his relentless attention, began to notice subtle shifts, the way she lingered longer at the window, the faint flush of color on her cheeks after riding to the ridges. One afternoon, as she returned from a brief visit to the general store, she overheard two women speaking near the well. "Have you seen Mrs. Harrow with that scout?" one asked, a note of scandal in her voice. "Shameful," the other replied. "She's a general's wife. She should know her place." But there's fire in her eyes, and it's not respect for her husband. Maggie's hands trembled as she continued walking, aware that the weight of every eye in town now pressed upon her. She had chosen to follow her heart, yet the consequences of that choice were already reaching outward, touching everything she had tried to protect. Silas met her that evening at the edge of the creek, and she nearly broke down in relief at seeing him. He reached for her hand, but she hesitated, torn between longing and fear. "You look troubled," he said. "I am," she admitted. "The town, it's already speaking. And my husband, he watches more closely than I realized." "Then we must be careful," he said, but not afraid. "Fear has no claim over those who follow their hearts." She smiled faintly, though her heart still pounded with the peril of her choices. In that smile was the acknowledgement of the risk, the thrill of rebellion, and the undeniable truth that she had found something she could not ignore. And so began the slow, dangerous dance between desire and duty, between public expectation and private longing. Maggie Harrow had chosen the frontier scout, Silas Kincaid, not knowing that love, when it defied convention, comes with consequences as sharp and relentless as the frontier winds. The days following the whispered rumors were a delicate balance of heartbeats and hushed glances. Maggie Harrow moved through her days with a growing awareness that every action, every word, could be scrutinized, judged, and misinterpreted. The town had begun to watch her with the keen eye of a hawk circling its prey, and though she moved with care, the shadows of suspicion trailed her relentlessly. Silas Kincaid, meanwhile, remained a steady presence at the edges of her life, his calm certainty a counterpoint to the chaos brewing around them. He had learned to read the subtle shifts in her expression, the tension in her shoulders, the quick flick of her eyes toward the street when a neighbor passed by. It was a delicate dance, each meeting weighted with unspoken risk, each touch of a hand or brush of a shoulder a choice that could change everything. One morning, Maggie ventured to the ridge outside town under the pretense of overseeing the delivery of supplies. She had learned the rhythms of Silver Creek, when the general conducted his inspections, when the townspeople gathered at the market, when the watchful eyes would be elsewhere. Silas was waiting at the top of the ridge, leaning casually against a rock, the wind tugging at his coat. "You came," he said, his voice a quiet anchor against the rustle of the grasses. "I did," Maggie replied, her chest tight with anticipation and fear. "I needed a moment of truth." Silas nodded. "Here, the world is ours. No eyes to judge, no whispers to chase us." They climbed higher together, the town below shrinking into a patchwork of roofs and dirt streets. Maggie felt the familiar thrill of freedom, the pulse of desire mingled with dread. They had begun to share more than glances and fleeting words, they spoke of dreams, of regrets, of the lives they might have led under different circumstances. "I sometimes imagine what it would be like," she confessed, her voice barely above the wind, "to live without expectation. To be free of the rules, the duties, the endless need to be someone I am not." Silas turned to her, eyes soft yet intense. "That life exists, Maggie. But it comes with choices and consequences. We cannot escape the world entirely, but we can carve a space for ourselves within it." She shivered, not from the cold but from the weight of the truth in his words. She had chosen him, had risked the stability of her life for a chance at something real, something alive, and now she understood that every choice carried its own burden. As spring deepened, their encounters became more daring. Maggie found reasons to linger near the stables, near the river, near the outskirts where the town's gaze was distracted by commerce and labor. Each meeting carried the thrill of forbidden intimacy, the brush of hands, the quiet laughter, the stolen moments of genuine connection. But the shadows of consequence grew ever darker. The townspeople began to speak more openly now, no longer content with hushed whispers. At the general store, she overheard conversations that made her stomach knot with tension. "They say the scout is more than just a wanderer," one woman remarked. "Mrs. Harrow looks at him like she sees the world differently. It's scandalous." "Scandalous, yes," another agreed. "A general's wife should know her place. But I suppose the heart has a mind of its own. Dangerous, that wayward heart." Maggie's cheeks flushed, a mixture of shame and defiance, and she walked on, gripping the basket of goods tighter. She had chosen love, she reminded herself, but the weight of social judgment pressed against her every step. Rowan, her companion in thought and secret, arrived as she returned home, slipping past the servants and the general's watchful gaze. He handed her a small bundle, a letter, folded carefully. "From whom?" she asked, though she already knew. "From a friend," he said, his eyes fixed on hers. "Someone who understands the world we navigate." She opened it carefully, reading the words that confirmed what she had feared. The town's suspicions were growing, and those who once whispered behind closed doors were beginning to act in ways that could not be ignored. "They watch us," she said quietly, folding the letter. "They will not stop." Silas took her hand, a touch both comforting and dangerous. "Then we move carefully. Every moment is a choice, and every choice has weight. But remember, the heart cannot be forced into obedience. It is both our freedom and our peril." Days turned into weeks, and the tension escalated. Maggie's husband, General Harrow, began to notice subtle changes: the way she lingered at windows, the way she smiled faintly at passing riders, the slight flush that accompanied her sudden attentiveness to distant sounds. He said nothing at first, watching and calculating, his discipline and pride battling with the whispers of suspicion that reached him from the town. One evening, he confronted her in the privacy of their parlor, the fire casting long shadows across the room. "Maggie," he said, voice low but firm, "there are things I see, things I hear. You must understand, a marriage is built on trust and duty. Anything that threatens that is dangerous." She met his gaze, struggling to maintain composure. "Thomas, I know. But my heart, it is not so easily contained. You know me, and you know that I seek something more than routine and order." His eyes darkened, a mixture of anger and sorrow. "You flirt with ruin, with dishonor. Do you understand what you risk? Your reputation, your family, our lives in this town." "I do," she said softly. "And yet, I cannot deny what I feel. I cannot undo the connection I have found." The general turned away, running a hand over his face. "Then you must choose, Maggie. Choose between what is safe and what is true. There is no middle path in this matter." She nodded, though her heart quivered. She had made her choice, but the full weight of its consequences was only beginning to settle upon her. Every glance at Silas, every stolen moment, was now a defiance not just of social norms but of her husband's authority, of the very structure of her life. And the frontier, once a vast expanse of freedom and possibility, had become a dangerous stage where every action was observed, every whisper recorded, every misstep magnified. Maggie felt the thrill and terror of their love in equal measure, knowing that each day brought them closer to exposure, closer to the inevitable reckoning. One night, as they met at the edge of the forest, the town quiet under a blanket of darkness, Silas pressed her hand to his chest. "You are braver than you know," he said, his voice a whisper against the wind. "But bravery alone cannot shield us. We must be clever, cautious, and patient." "I fear patience," she admitted, leaning against him. "For every day I wait, the risk grows. Yet I cannot rush, for rushing could destroy everything." Silas pulled her close, the warmth of his body a refuge from the cold and the judgment of the world. "Then we endure," he said. "We endure and we survive. And perhaps, in the end, love will find its place, even here, on the frontier." The following weeks were a careful dance. Maggie and Silas learned to communicate through subtle gestures, brief notes, and meetings timed with the routines of the town. They navigated the dangers with skill, but each encounter carried a weight of suspense, a thrill that was inseparable from fear. Yet the town was relentless. A neighbor spotted them near the river, a carriage driver reported unusual behavior, and gossip spread like wildfire. Each time, Maggie felt the tightening grip of scrutiny, the invisible pressure of judgment pressing on her shoulders. Her husband, ever perceptive, was aware of every nuance, every faint blush, every lingering glance that betrayed her divided heart. Despite the tension, or perhaps because of it, their connection deepened. Maggie discovered a courage within herself she had not known, a willingness to defy convention in pursuit of authenticity. Silas revealed layers of loyalty, honor, and understanding that went far beyond his reputation as a frontier scout. They began to imagine a life together, not just stolen moments, but a future where choice, not obligation, guided their steps. But Silver Creek was not a forgiving place. Every step toward love brought them closer to conflict, and the closer they moved, the sharper the consequences became. Maggie could feel the eyes of the town upon her, could hear the whispers in every market, every gathering, every church service. And though she loved Silas with an intensity that frightened her, she understood fully that desire alone could not protect them from the social storm gathering on the horizon. The tension in Silver Creek had shifted from whispers to unmistakable hostility. The town's streets, once filled with polite nods and casual greetings, now seemed narrower, the air heavier. Every glance at Maggie Harrow carried judgment, every conversation behind her back a dagger she could feel but not see. It was not simply curiosity anymore, it was outrage. And it had found a target in her. Silas Kincaid was aware of the growing danger. His keen eyes, trained to read the wilderness, now scanned human behavior with equal precision. He noticed the merchants' wary glances, the men lingering longer than necessary at the general store, the way the town sheriff's patrols seemed to coincide suspiciously with their secret rendezvous. He spoke little of it to Maggie at first, not wanting to shadow their fragile moments of freedom with dread. But the storm of scrutiny was impossible to ignore. One evening, as dusk painted the town in muted oranges and purples, Maggie ventured out to meet Silas at their usual clearing near the creek. The wind tugged at her cloak, the bare trees swaying in restless motion. She arrived to find him waiting, but his expression was grim. "They know," he said simply, his jaw tight. "It's no longer speculation. They are organizing, gathering. Tonight is not safe." Maggie's stomach twisted. "They, what do you mean?" "They are coming," he said. "Some of the men in town have made it clear they intend to confront us. To stop this. By force if necessary." Fear clawed at her, sharp and urgent, but beneath it stirred a deeper current, a stubborn defiance, a refusal to relinquish the bond they had nurtured. She nodded, determination hardening her features. "Then we meet them. Together." That night, the first confrontation arrived. A small group of townspeople, lanterns swaying and voices low but menacing, approached the ridge where Maggie and Silas had chosen to meet. The scouts of their own community, some armed with clubs or pistols, some merely carrying the weight of moral outrage, had come to assert the town's judgment. Silas stepped forward, hand resting near his holster, but he made no move to draw. "You do not need to do this," he said calmly. "We have harmed no one. We are only living as we choose." One of the men, broad-shouldered and grim, spat onto the dirt. "Living as you please? She is the general's wife. You make a mockery of our town and its honor." Maggie stepped beside Silas, her hand brushing his. "I am not a mockery," she said, voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "I am a woman who has chosen her path, just as you choose yours. And no amount of anger can undo what is in my heart." A tense silence followed, broken by the creak of a door from the town below and the faint whinny of horses. The confrontation was electric, each second stretching as if the wind itself held its breath. Then, one of the men lunged, a wild swing aimed at Silas. He reacted instinctively, moving aside, and the men stumbled, sprawling across the dirt. Maggie gasped, her heart hammering. "Stop. Please, this is not what I wanted." But the tension had ignited something inevitable. More men pressed forward, some shouting threats, others merely daring the two to retreat. Silas remained composed, deflecting blows, keeping them from harm without escalating the violence unnecessarily. Maggie stood behind him, hands clenched, her own fear a roaring tide inside her chest. By the time the men withdrew, beaten back not by brute force but by Silas's cunning and Maggie's unflinching presence, the message was clear: Silver Creek would not tolerate this union. Every step they took in pursuit of love had made them a target, and the town's judgment was merciless. The days that followed were a careful negotiation. Maggie and Silas avoided the town whenever possible, moving only under cover of early morning or dusk. But whispers had become rumors, and rumors had become outright accusations. Even within the walls of her own home, Maggie could feel the eyes of servants and neighbors, the quiet judgment that hung in every gesture and phrase. Her husband, General Thomas Harrow, confronted her again, his voice a mixture of anger, sorrow, and disbelief. "Maggie," he said, standing in the parlor where the firelight flickered across his stern features, "you defy me, the town, the very life we have built together. This obsession with a man who is no more than a wanderer, do you realize what you risk?" "I do," she said, meeting his gaze, unflinching despite the tremor in her hands. "And yet, I cannot deny what I feel. I cannot undo it, nor will I pretend I can." He shook his head, a gesture of resignation and sorrow. "Then you have chosen a dangerous path, Maggie. One that will leave scars, on you, on me, on this town. And one day, you may regret it." The weight of his words settled over her, a tangible pressure, a reminder that love was not enough to shield them from consequence. Meanwhile, Silas worked tirelessly to secure their safety. He scouted the surrounding wilderness, created hidden routes, and prepared for potential ambushes. He was not reckless, but neither was he willing to allow fear to dictate the life they were building together. Each encounter, each confrontation, was a test of their resolve, a reminder that their love was both precious and perilous. Maggie found herself caught between two worlds, the structured, honorable life she had known as a general's wife and the untamed, passionate existence she shared with Silas. Every letter from him, every stolen meeting, was a lifeline, yet the stakes grew higher with each passing day. One afternoon, while she walked along the ridge alone, she reflected on the choices that had brought her here. The spark she had felt the first time she saw Silas, the thrill of defying convention, the quiet joy of being seen for who she truly was, these moments had seemed fleeting at first, but now they carried the weight of inevitability. She could not turn back. She had chosen this path, and every consequence, every threat, every act of judgment from Silver Creek was a price she was willing to bear. But even as she steeled herself, a deeper fear had begun to take root, a fear not of physical danger alone, but of the emotional toll of living outside the bounds of expectation. She loved Silas with a depth she had never known, yet the knowledge that her choices had alienated her community, endangered her status, and strained her marriage weighed heavily. That night, they met under the cover of darkness, the stars overhead casting faint light on their faces. Silas reached for her hand, his touch grounding her, offering strength. "We cannot hide forever," he said. "But we can endure, and we can survive. The world may oppose us, but our bond is ours alone." Maggie rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence, and in that moment, the tumult of judgment, fear, and consequence seemed to fade, replaced by a fragile hope. Yet even as they embraced, the reality of Silver Creek pressed upon them. The town's hostility was unrelenting, and the consequences of forbidden love were unavoidable. Each day brought new challenges, new confrontations, and the constant threat that their carefully guarded moments of intimacy could be exposed at any moment. And through it all, Maggie understood a profound truth: love, when it defies convention and duty, is a perilous thing. It brings joy and passion, but it also brings danger, heartbreak, and regret. She had chosen her heart over safety, desire over duty, and now the consequences of that choice were becoming ever clearer. Silver Creek had reached a boiling point. The town's eyes were no longer merely watchful, they were accusatory, sharp as knives, and ready to strike. Rumors had morphed into open confrontation, and the whispers that once circulated in hushed tones now echoed in every corner of the streets. Maggie Harrow could feel the suffocating weight of judgment pressing down upon her like the heavy winter snows that still lingered along the ridges. It began with the unexpected arrival of Reverend Caldwell at the edge of her property. His face, usually calm and measured, was drawn with concern and unspoken outrage. "Maggie," he said, voice low, "I am troubled. The town is uneasy, and I fear for what may come of your actions. Do you understand the gravity of this?" She swallowed hard, the chill of fear crawling up her spine. "I understand," she admitted, though her heart quaked. "But my heart, it cannot deny what it has chosen. I cannot turn away from Silas, not now, not ever." The Reverend shook his head slowly. "You risk more than your reputation. You risk lives. The general, the scout, yourself, all are in peril. Please, reconsider. There is still time to preserve honor and safety." Maggie's eyes glimmered with unshed tears. "I have no time for regret. I acted with my heart. Whatever comes, comes. I cannot go back." Word of the confrontation spread quickly. By the following morning, the streets were abuzz with tension. Groups of men gathered near the mercantile, exchanging glances and mutters of plans to confront the scout and the woman who had dared defy convention. Mothers whispered warnings to their children, and shopkeepers exchanged nervous glances over counters. The town itself seemed poised on the edge of violence, its collective will united against the defiance of a single woman who had chosen love over duty. Maggie and Silas prepared for the inevitable. They stocked provisions, mapped escape routes through the forests and ridges, and strengthened the hidden paths they had used for secret meetings. Yet every preparation carried a bitter taste. Love had brought them together, but it had also drawn them into the crosshairs of judgment, danger, and betrayal. One evening, as the sky burned orange with the dying light of day, the confrontation arrived. A group of armed men, led by a local magistrate who had once served under General Harrow, advanced toward the ridge where Maggie and Silas had planned a final meeting before darkness fell. Their steps were deliberate, their eyes filled with anger and righteous indignation. Silas moved to meet them, his stance calm, measured, yet ready. "We wish no harm," he said evenly. "We only seek to live as we choose." The magistrate's voice was sharp. "You defy the town, the law, and the very fabric of this community. Leave, or face the consequences. Maggie stepped forward, her cloak billowing in the evening breeze, the flicker of firelight catching her determined gaze. I will not leave, she declared. I will not deny my heart. And I will not allow fear to dictate my life. The tension escalated. One man brandished a pistol, another a rifle. The air became charged with anticipation, the slightest misstep capable of igniting violence. Silas positioned himself protectively in front of Maggie, eyes scanning every movement, muscles coiled with readiness. Suddenly, a shot rang out, a warning, fired into the air. Dust and leaves swirled around them as the men pressed forward. Silas's hand hovered over his revolver, not drawn yet, but the potential for deadly consequence crackling between them all. Maggie's heart raced, a wild, untamed rhythm, echoing the chaos surrounding her. Stop this, she cried, her voice carrying over the tense murmur. Violence will solve nothing. Do you hear me? The men hesitated, the weight of her words cutting through their anger. Some lowered their weapons slightly, uncertainty flickering across their faces. But the confrontation was far from over. Then, from the edge of the ridge, a shot echoed, closer this time, grazing the earth between them and the advancing group. Panic surged. The men fell back, muttering curses, realizing the danger was real. Silas seized the moment, guiding Maggie down a hidden path through the trees, away from the immediate threat. They ran, hearts pounding, the wind tearing through their hair, branches lashing at their faces, but the path they had carved through countless secret meetings allowed them temporary safety. At last, they paused, breath ragged, hearts racing, hidden from view beneath the protective canopy of pines. Maggie sank to her knees, tears streaming freely now, the weight of their reality pressing down. We cannot stay here, she whispered. Not here, not ever. They will never accept us. They will never allow us this life. Silas knelt beside her, brushing wet hair from her face, his touch gentle yet firm. Then we leave, he said. We cannot change the town, nor their hatred, nor the judgment they impose. But we can choose ourselves. We can carve a life where our hearts are free. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation and clandestine movement. Maggie began to gather possessions she could carry, letters, clothing, small treasures that symbolized the life she was leaving behind. Silas provided guidance, mapping the trails, warning of patrols, and ensuring their path to freedom was as secure as possible. Yet with every step, the tension grew, for Silver Creek's eyes were everywhere, and betrayal lurked in the shadows. One night, while they rested beside a quiet stream, Maggie spoke, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Do you ever wonder, she asked softly, if we have made a mistake? If our love is worth the danger, the fear, the lives we disrupt? Silas gazed at her, the reflection of moonlight in his eyes catching the unspoken emotion. Every choice carries risk, he said. Love always comes at a cost. But I would rather face this danger with you than live a lifetime without knowing what we have. Her fingers traced the lines of his hand, the calluses that spoke of countless days in the wilderness. I never imagined it would feel like this. So alive, yet so fraught with peril. I have chosen this path, yet I fear the consequences will leave scars we cannot heal. Silas smiled faintly, brushing a tear from her cheek. Scars do not diminish love. They mark it, remind us that we dared, that we lived fully, that we chose honesty over pretense. We will endure, Maggie. Together. But endurance alone could not shield them from the coming storm. The town had grown bolder. Magistrates, farmers, and even a few soldiers loyal to General Harrow began to patrol the edges of the woods, searching for the two who had dared defy convention. The general himself had been absent from town, likely summoned to distant command, but his influence lingered, shaping every action of those left behind. Maggie and Silas moved with caution, yet the tension of constant pursuit wore on them both. They were not simply fleeing townspeople, they were fleeing the expectations, the judgments, and the moral outrage of a world that refused to accept love that transgressed duty. Each step was a test of courage, each day a reminder that passion had consequences, and that freedom demanded sacrifice. Even in the wilderness, where the air was fresh and the wind untamed, Maggie felt the invisible chains of society pressing upon her. She had risked everything for love, and the cost was now undeniable. Every moment of joy was shadowed by fear, every touch of tenderness haunted by the possibility of discovery, every heartbeat a reminder that their defiance had drawn the ire of an entire community. And yet, in the midst of fear and danger, Maggie felt a clarity she had never known. She loved Silas, not lightly, not fleetingly, but with a depth that transcended reason, propriety, and consequence. She had chosen this path, fully aware of the cost, and she would not turn back. The night stretched on, silent except for the murmur of the stream and the distant howl of wolves. Maggie leaned against Silas, finding solace in the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, a reminder that even in defiance, even in danger, love could be a refuge. But as dawn approached, a sobering realization settled over her: the frontier, wild and untamed, could shelter them only so long. Sooner or later, the forces of society, duty, and judgment would close in, demanding a reckoning. And Maggie, the general's wife who had risked everything for a frontier scout, would have to confront the consequences of her choices, whatever they might be. The wilderness beyond Silver Creek offered freedom, yet it carried its own harsh truths. Maggie Harrow and Silas Kincaid had escaped the immediate scrutiny of the town, yet the weight of their choices pressed heavily upon them. Every mile from civilization was a mile from safety, comfort, and certainty. Their love, fiery and unyielding, had brought them together, but it could not shield them from the consequences they had chosen to accept. In the quiet mornings, when the sun spilled across the rolling hills, Maggie would watch Silas work the land, hunt, and tend to the small camp they had carved from the wilderness. His movements were sure, precise, grounded in experience, and yet they carried the tenderness he reserved solely for her. She would often pause, heart swelling with gratitude and fear, and wonder if they had truly escaped the shadows of their past, or if they were merely prolonging the inevitable reckoning. Their days were filled with routine and labor, yet within the routine lay stolen moments of intimacy, a brush of fingers while mending a fire, shared laughter over a simple meal, the quiet warmth of a hand held against the cold night air. These moments were bittersweet, for every joy carried a memory of what they had lost: family, community, safety, and the life Maggie had known as the general's wife. One evening, as the amber sun dipped low behind distant mountains, Maggie sat by the riverbank, her reflection fractured in the rippling water. She traced the lines of her face, lines of worry, longing, and resolve. The choice she had made still pressed heavily upon her. She had risked everything for love, yet part of her could not help but wonder, if she had waited, if she had honored duty before desire, might her life have taken a safer, perhaps happier course. Silas approached quietly, settling beside her. He did not speak at first, merely letting the silence fill the space between them. Finally, he said, "Your thoughts are heavy tonight." "I am thinking of the life I left behind," Maggie admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "The people I disappointed, the world that rejected our love. I do not regret loving you, Silas, but I cannot help but wonder if there was a way to love without leaving such destruction in our wake." He took her hand, his grip firm, grounding her in the present. "Every choice we make carries risk. The world may judge us, may oppose us, but we cannot live as shadows of what is expected. We live as ourselves, Maggie. That is the truth we carry, and it is enough." Tears filled her eyes, yet she smiled, a fragile acknowledgement of both sorrow and gratitude. "You make it sound simple," she whispered. "But love is never simple, is it?" Silas shook his head. "No, it is not. And perhaps that is what makes it worth everything." The weeks passed, each day a delicate negotiation of survival and secrecy. They hunted, gathered, and maintained their hidden camp, yet the constant tension of being hunted by both conscience and society never fully lifted. Maggie found herself growing stronger, more self-reliant, yet the quiet ache of longing for a world that had once offered her structure and safety never faded entirely. One night, as a storm rolled across the plains, lightning fracturing the dark sky in jagged silver streaks, Silas held her close beside the fire. The wind howled through the trees, and rain lashed against the canvas of their temporary shelter. "Maggie," he said softly, "we have endured so much to be together. Every fear, every danger, every moment of doubt, look at us. We are still standing. Still together." She pressed her head to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his presence. "Yes, still together," she whispered, though a pang of regret lingered beneath the words. "But I wonder, if only I had waited, if only I had been patient, perhaps life would have been simpler. Perhaps I would have been safer, happier, in a way that did not demand constant vigilance and sacrifice." Silas lifted her chin, his eyes locking with hers. "Do not dwell on what if. Life is not lived in possibilities, but in choices. You chose love, Maggie. That choice defines you, not the regret of what might have been." The storm raged on, and in the shelter of their shared defiance, Maggie allowed herself to release the tension she had carried for so long. In that release was a mixture of grief and relief, grief for the life she had left behind, relief for the love she had found. Days turned into weeks, and the frontier became their sanctuary, yet even in isolation, the lessons of society's judgment lingered. Maggie understood fully now that every act of love, especially one that defied convention, carried consequences that could not be ignored. Her relationship with Silas was passionate, profound, and deeply fulfilling, yet it had required the dissolution of her old life and the embrace of constant uncertainty. She thought often of her husband, of the life they might have had if her heart had not strayed. She thought of Silver Creek, and the faces of those who had once whispered behind her back. She did not regret love, she never would, but she recognized that passion exacts a price, and that price had been paid in full. Yet even amidst reflection and the quiet ache of memory, Maggie's resolve strengthened. She would not allow regret to consume her. She had chosen authenticity over safety, desire over duty, and in that choice, she had discovered a life that was fully her own. One crisp morning, as the first light of dawn painted the horizon in shades of rose and gold, Silas led her to a hill overlooking a valley untouched by human interference. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth, the vast openness a reminder of the freedom they had carved from the wilderness. "Maggie," he said, voice steady, "look at this. All this, and more. We have made a home where our love can live freely, away from the eyes of those who cannot understand." She gazed across the valley, heart swelling. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "And it is ours." He took her hands in his, eyes burning with intensity and tenderness. "We endured because we believed. We endured because our hearts demanded it. Whatever the world may think, whatever judgment awaits us, know this, we chose each other, and that is everything." Maggie's lips curved into a smile, tears threatening but held back by the sheer force of emotion. "Yes," she whispered. "Everything." In that moment, the wilderness embraced them, a silent witness to a love that had defied duty, expectation, and fear. Though the past remained, with its regrets and scars, the present belonged to them alone, a fragile, radiant testament to the power of choice and the courage to follow one's heart.